Well, I know that some of you know that last week, Greg and I were away. We just returned from a week's vacation in Mexico. We're in a beautiful place in Mexico called San Miguel de Allende. It is an ancient, old colonial town right high up in the mountains of central Mexico. And we were there for my birthday, which was December 13th, but the day before my birthday was a day of great celebration in Mexico. And it is every year on December 12th, because December 12th is the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And if you've ever been to Mexico, you know that Our Lady of Guadalupe is everywhere in Mexico. You see her image in restaurants and in shops and along the sides of buildings, and pretty much in every Mexican household I've ever been in. Mexicans love Our Lady of Guadalupe. They have a great devotion to her. And Greg and I were so thrilled to be there this past Monday to witness the fireworks and the parades and the celebrations in honor of Our Lady. Now, many of you know, just as Mexicans have a great devotion to Our Lady, so do I. And that is why I love the fourth Sunday of Advent, because it's the only time, the only Sunday in the entire year that I get to talk to you about Mary. Mary doesn't appear a lot in our lectionary readings, does she? And the reason for that is that Mary only appears in the Bible 4 times. That's it. You know, Mary appears more in the Quran, the holy book of Islam, than she does in the Bible. Our Muslim friends, like the Afghan family we're sponsoring, they revere Mary more than most Christians do. Most Christians, even progressive ones like ours, we only think about Mary once a year at Christmas when we put up our nativity sets. We tend to forget about her the rest of the year. And I told you last year, I think I know why. Because I think most Christians think Mary is just for Catholics. And I think that makes them a little bit wary of Mary. That was going to be my title, Wary of Mary. Actually, what I think they're wary of is the Catholics' devotion to Mary, which many Christians, I think, see as a form of idolatry, or they think somehow she's overshadowing Jesus. For those of us who are devoted to Mary, we see Mary as our way to Jesus. Now, many of you know that when I was a young man in my 20s, I was a religious brother in the Catholic Church. And the order of brothers that I belong to is called the Marist Brothers. They're a group of religious men who are devoted to Mary. And the motto of the Marist Brothers in Latin is Ad Jesum per Mariam, which means to Jesus through Mary. And so during my years as a brother, every morning in the monastery, we would get up, and before we began our work, we would join together in the chapel, and we would say prayers and sing songs to Mary, who was our way to Jesus. For me, she represents the divine feminine, the birther of the cosmos, the one who gave birth to the light of the world, that feminine face of God. The Christian church for centuries has been so male-dominated that the female voice has been repressed and stifled. And we need her now more than ever, that voice. Now, many of you are familiar with Rob Bell. Rob Bell is a best-selling Christian author. And he got his start right here in West Michigan. He was the pastor of Morris Hill Church in Granville. And now, of course, he is a speaker all over the world and has appeared on Oprah. But Rob Bell wrote many wonderful books, but one of the books that he wrote is called What We Talk About When We Talk About God. And in that book, Rob Bell says this. He says, when the female voice is repressed and stifled, the entire community can easily find themselves cut off from the sacred feminine, depriving themselves of the full image of God. The full image of God, my friends, is both masculine and feminine. God is both father and mother. And that's who Mary represents for me, that mother aspect of God. But who was the real Mary, that teenager? Who was she? What was she really like? Well, as we heard in our words of integration and guidance this morning, most of us grew up with that image of her as being that subservient handmaiden, the meek and mild virgin. Well, all of that is a myth. The real Mary, as we heard this morning, was a very courageous and bold young woman. During the time in which she was living, she was at the lowest rung of society. She was a woman, she was poor, and here she was, she found herself pregnant out of wedlock, which there was a lot of shame in that. She was an outcast. And yet how amazing that God chose her, of all the people, to give birth to the light of the world. And that's why her Magnificat, that song that we heard part of in our call to worship, that song that she gives to God isn't really this pretty little love song. Rather, what she's proclaiming is that change is coming through her, through a lowly person. She says, God has looked with favor upon me, a lowly person, a poor person, an outcast, and from now on, generations are going to call people like me blessed, because God is going to pull down the mighty and powerful from their thrones and lift up us, the lowly. God is going to send the rich away empty. He's going to fill people like us with good things. The poor are going to be filled. The hungry are going to be fed. That's what she's proclaiming in the Magnificat. And as recently as the 20th century, the Magnificat has been banned by many governments around the world. During the British occupation of India, it was forbidden to sing the Magnificat. The same was true in Argentina during the reign of Juan Perón. You could not read the Magnificat aloud in public. And it was also true in Guatemala in the 1980s. The reason was because the words of Mary's song would stir the impoverished masses. Change is on its way. That's what Mary was proclaiming, a new world order. And of course, governments don't like change. They want to keep control and power. But that's why I see Mary's spirit so alive today, and I see it in young women like Mary was. I see that spirit of Mary in Greta Thunberg, the climate change activist. Change is coming. I see her spirit alive in Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist for female education. I see Mary's spirit alive in Emma Gonzalez, who's the young American activist for gun control. And I see Mary's spirit alive in recent years in all of the women who have been brave enough to speak up in the Me Too and Time's Up movement, who are finally speaking the truth after years of being silenced by men. That's what Mary is proclaiming. Change is on its way. A new world order is coming. And I especially see Mary today in those young refugee mothers who are crossing the border. Mary herself was a refugee. And you see these brave, courageous young women trying to have a new life for their family. Now, one of our friends, Ryan Kuja, he lives in Holland. He's the author of a wonderful book called From the Inside Out. Last year, Ryan wrote a modern-day version of the Magnificat, and I'd like to read it for you today. I can't contain my excitement about all this. Out of all people, God noticed me, a poor pregnant teenager. Everyone will call people like me blessed from now on. God's love is so much greater than I can even imagine. God shows love for everyone, even those society despises. For the LGBTQ community, immigrants, refugees, the addicted and the shamed. God knows Black lives matter, that refugees and immigrants are God's beloved. All the people who are seen as less than human, God knows and God loves. God lifts up those who are preyed upon by corrupt politicians, the hungry, the ones brutalized by the police and immigration and customs agents, and families without health care. God invites each of us to the table to speak and to tell our story, to be heard and to be known. The power-hungry perpetrators who care only about their agendas don't have the last word. I can sense God's presence holding me and all God's children close, faithfully liberating us all, just as God has promised. I love that modern version because it reminds us that the Magnificat is timeless and that during our time here, we as Christians are called to continue to speak those words of truth as Mary did. We are called to continue to bring about that kingdom, that world of change that Mary was calling for. And that's what we're doing in Advent. We are saying yes, like Mary said yes. We're saying yes to being filled with the light and love of God so that we can be those people of change. Meister Eckhart, the 13th century Christian mystic, said, all of us are called to be mothers of God because God is always needing to be born. All of us are called to be mothers of God. God is always needing to be born. And that's why I love this time of year. We say Christ is born. We don't say Christ was born. It's not past tense. Christ is born. It's present tense. When we feed the hungry, Christ is born. When we lift up the lowly, Christ is born. When we speak truth to power, Christ is born. It's about us right now. And so, my friends, in this week leading up to Christmas, may all of us have the courage, like Mary did, to say yes, to give birth to the light in this world of darkness. And may I invite you to call upon Mary, not just at Christmas time, but throughout the year. She's not just for Catholics. She's for all of us. May we, like Mary, magnify God's love and light, and let us shine it for all the world to see. Namaste.